Hi, I'm John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy with another Global Real Estate School podcast. Hey, welcome to the podcast. My little girl Lucy's with me. I don't know why we do not have our streaming video. It's supposed to be on there, but hopefully everything else is working okay. Lucy, say hi to everybody. We're going to do a quick live stream here at Global Real Estate School. Sometimes you've seen Lucy, she's ready to get down, so we're going to let her down, but she loves to come down and hang out with me when I'm doing some of my work in my office. She's actually leaving now because she's camera shy. But we're going to go over some real estate exam questions to help you pass the real estate exam on the very first attempt. So again, if you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. I'd love for you to click on the bell. That will allow you to know each and every time that we go live. And our channel is growing by leaps and bounds, so I'm very excited about that. Be sure and subscribe. I've been doing a lot of research and hard work on how to grow your YouTube channel, and I've been looking at the analytics, and you know what? Between 5 and 6 p.m. is when I have my largest number of viewers who are online. So hopefully we have a good turnout. And by the way, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat. I'm using a program, so I will go out and check the messages here in just a little bit. You can leave those in the chat. But we need to get right into the broadcast. So we're going to do that right now. And I'm going to bring up an exam question that actually we're kind of picking up on our second, our second little session of crash course to pass the real estate exam. There we go. We should have audio now. So hopefully, I'm going to go back over here to the PowerPoint, and I should have power. Okay, good. All right. So sorry about that, but we have audio now. So let's go into the questions very quickly and get right into this. Who does the escrow agent actually represent in a transaction? Great question. Who does the escrow agent? Now the escrow agent is the same person as the title company. And who do they represent in the real estate transaction? Well, they do actually represent both the buyer and the seller. They're not there to represent the real estate broker, and they're not there to represent one party. They're there to represent both the seller and the buyer. Now this, I know some of you may be saying, well, wait a minute, John. What if the buyer's closing at one location and the seller's closing at another location? Would that answer be different? And what I have to remind you is that you don't want to try to read too much into the questions, okay? You read this question, really the best and only answer would be both the buyer and the seller. They're not there to represent the real estate broker. And, if you found yourself saying, well, wait a minute, what if it's just the buyer's side? Well, it doesn't ask you that question in the problem. It doesn't say if the buyer's closing at one escrow agency, who does the escrow agent represent? It doesn't say that, does it? It just asks you, who does the escrow agent represent in a transaction? Well, it's the buyer and the seller. Now, this is where so many people get tripped up on the real estate exam, is that they want to try to draw too much other information into the question. And you have to stay laser focused on that question and answer only what they're asking you, okay? So we're going to do that on the exam. Heard from one of my students today from Indiana who passed her real estate exam today, and heard from actually this last week a lot of people who've passed the real estate exam, which has been awesome. So I'm very excited about that. So keep up the good work there. Our next question, Allison is influencing buyers to buy in certain areas, but is careful to only do the practice when it is based on protective classes under the fair housing laws. Allison is practicing, believe it or not, this is probably one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the problem most real estate agents fall guilty of in fair housing. And it's not that they intentionally try to move people to specific areas, but sometimes we take it upon ourselves to think, oh, I think that Jose and his wife would feel more comfortable over in this location because there's more of a Spanish or a Mexican or a Latino population there. And that's not for you or I to make that decision. We need to show Jose and his family homes in any area of the community and really welcome them and let them be welcome in any areas of this community or the city. Now, I only use the word Jose because it is kind of a common Latino name, and I'm just using that as an example for the real estate exam because it is a problem that real estate professionals want to do. I could have used a German name. I'm trying to think of a German name, Joachim, because I was a German exchange student, and Joachim Steinberg, who was my host family. You know, if Joachim came to your community and you knew there were a lot of Germans who lived in a specific area, and you thought this would be the best place for Joachim and his family, you can't do that, okay? And that is an illegal practice, and we call that illegal practice steering. Now, you'll see that question on the exam. So in this example, Allison is influencing buyers to buy in certain areas, but is careful to only do this practice when it's based on protective classes. We don't care how careful Allison is. If Allison's doing that, Allison's guilty of steering, and she can't do that. So be sure you understand for the exam what steering is. That's directing people to specific areas based on their race or their the color of their skin or any of those other protective classes that we talk about in fair housing. Now, when I took the real estate exam a while back, I'm not supposed to talk about questions that I saw in the real estate exam, but I had to take the exam for my instructor certification. So I'm not going to tell you what I saw in the exam, but I want you to know is sometimes we talk about things like blockbusting. And we really think of, blockbusting is when an agent goes into a neighborhood and they tell the people in that neighborhood, like I might go into a neighborhood and say, hey, did you know that a certain group of people are purchasing in your neighborhood? That's called blockbusting or panic peddling, because what I'm trying to do is induce fear or, be careful. Property values may go down over the next year or two because there's all these new people coming into your neighborhood. That's blockbusting. You need to know what that is. Now, what if you saw that where the agent went into a senior citizen, more of a senior neighborhood where there were lots of elderly people. And I said, hey, did you know people are moving in with children? Now remember, familial status, family status is under protective classes. And so that's a blockbusting. So we, as instructors, we get guilty, or I should say we get guilty. Some of us are guilty of really just focusing on race as blockbusting tactics. but it can even be senior adults and familial status. So read those questions very carefully. You need to know what steering is for the exam. You need to know what blockbusting is. Remember, steering's when you direct people into a neighborhood because of their race or any of those other protected classes. Blockbusting is when you panic pedaling. You go into a neighborhood and you say, "Uh-oh, did you know these people are moving into your neighborhood?" Again, I gave you an example. It's not just race. It could be familial status and people moving in with children. You need to know what redlining is. This is the crash course. The night before, I want you to go over this. I'm giving you, these are 3 questions you're going to see on the test. So know what those are. Redlining is when a bank or an insurance company says, we won't do business in that area. We won't make loans. We won't underwrite insurance because it's an area that we feel is a minority area and property values are going down and we don't want to touch that area. That's redlining. You can't do that. You will see, trust me, you might see all 3 of those definitions on the exam, but I guarantee you'll see one of those questions, maybe 2 or 3. I talked about definitions, and we have flashcards at Global Real Estate School. If you haven't downloaded those flashcards or purchased those, they're great. You can download them, and they go right to your mobile phone, and they work great. So be sure and check those out. Let's go to the next question. The do not call rules apply to telephone solicitations made. Now, this is a tough question, isn't it? In-state only calls, state-to-state only calls, federal calls, or both in-state and state-to-state calls. You know what? I cover the do not call list, but I'm thinking, do I cover this top? I mean, this is why the real estate exam can be tough. This is why you need those digital flashcards. It's why you need My Real Estate Exam Coach, because I know I cover this in My Real Estate Exam Coach, which I also give you all these practice questions. I think you get over 500 practice questions with My Real Estate Exam Coach. But what is the answer to this one? Let's take a look here. And it is both in-state and state-to-state questions. You know, even as tough as this question is, this is one of those questions that I wrote for you because really it's the only one that makes sense. And sometimes you're going to see questions on the exam and, the do not call rules. Well, in-state only calls doesn't make sense, does it? State-to-state only calls, to me, doesn't make sense. Federal calls, that doesn't make sense. But when you see both in-state and state-to-state calls, that's probably the best choice, and it's the only one that really makes sense. So I just want you to be aware and remind yourself that the exam writers love to write test questions, and some of them will not make sense. There will only be one answer that makes sense. And so you can look at a question and say, I have the foggiest idea. I don't remember covering that in class. But when you read that question, remember, we want to read the question 2 or 3 times. When you read that question, look at the 4 choices and ask yourself, which one really makes the most sense? And that's the one you need to go with. Okay? So don't forget that. All right, let's keep moving on. Jared owns a home on 4th Street in Esther, Missouri. We used to have an Esther, Missouri, where I lived. We had Flat River, Esther, Elvins, River Mines. I always jokingly say, when I I went to grade school, and then when you went to middle school, they either sent you to Esther or Elvins. I was on the Elvins side. The Elvins side, that was a little bit rougher side. I enjoyed going there. They taught me how to smoke in Elvins. Anyway, but there were great guys and girls from Elvins, and most of my friends, even if they were from Elvins, I would get a kick out of that because, you know, you learn to grow up if you went to West County or Elvins. The Esther kids were a little bit more easier going, but we had a good time at Elvins, and then we consolidated the whole area to Park Hills. I'm probably getting myself in trouble here, but anyway, I did learn to smoke it in Elvins, going to Elvins Junior High, but I quit smoking years ago, so don't worry about that. But anyway, we consolidated the area, and it's now called Park Hills, but I had to write a test question and incorporate some of my old heritage. So, and 4th Street on Esther, man, you could get a listing and sell it in no time over there. I mean, that was a great street. So Jared owns a home on 4th Street in Esther, Missouri. I sold a lot of them over there for $29,900. A remedy in court compelling Jared to sell his property is known as, wow, this is real estate exam question. That's what you're going to see right there. You are going to see questions like this that are worded so weird. Jared owns a home on 4th Street in Esther, Missouri. A remedy in court compelling Jared to sell his property is known as, well, is it foreclosure? Let's look at that. Foreclosure? Is it specific performance, equity right of redemption, or right of execution? You know, this is one of those questions like the last one that, to me, the only one that makes sense is specific performance. If it's a remedy through the court compelling Jared to sell his property, well, that would be specific performance. In other words, the court is saying you have to sell your property, Jared, and that is a specific action or a specific performance. In this example, Jared probably was trying to get out of selling his house, but the remedy through the court compelling Jared to sell his property is specific performance. So you understand that if a seller puts their house on the market, accepts a contract from a buyer, and then wants to get out of the deal. So in this case, Jared put his house on the market, accepted a contract with the buyer, and then Jared probably wanted to try to say, I don't think I want to sell my house. I'm sorry, but go find another home. I'm going to keep my house. And the buyer's saying, I don't think so, Jared. We've made all these plans and spent money on inspections and got our loan. We've sold our home. We're buying your home, Jared. And Jared said, I don't want to sell my home. So they go to court, and the court then has a remedy for this situation, compelling Jared to sell his property. Well, that is called specific performance. So good question there. I'm going to go here. I've got a couple of questions that are math questions, but we're going to go past those because I'm going to do math on the next broadcast. Terry and Ann have a contract provision making the sale of their home at 345 Smith Street, Farmington, Missouri, subject to the buyers qualifying for a rural development loan. What is this called? It's called an amendment, a contingency, an exclusion, or a covenant of promise. Well, I think that's called a contingency. don't forget that anytime when you get your license and you start working with buyers, they're going to want to purchase property. But many of your buyers may say, we still have to get our loan approved, and the house has to be appraised, and it has to go through underwriting. Remember, the underwriter has to sign. That's a question. Who's the last person to sign off on all the paperwork before it goes to closing? The underwriter. Well, the buyers need to, or you as the buyer's agent, need to make sure that you write a contingency or include a contingency clause on, in this case, what? They have a clause in making the sale of their home on 345 Smith Street subject to buyers qualifying for a rural development loan. So they're subject to getting a USDA loan. And so that financing contingency, that's called a contingency. So you'll be seeing that a lot. And that's what that question is. Well, David is a new real estate licensee. David may contact an expired listing client to solicit new business referrals. This is part of the do not call list. We cover this. Be sure on my YouTube channel, just go in the little box there for YouTube. There's a search bar in YouTube. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, go over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Let me put that up there. Don't forget to subscribe, and be sure and click on the bell. There we go. That way you'll be notified each and every time we go live. You can search for us on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search for Global Real Estate School. Now, when you get over there, I want you to click on the little search bar inside YouTube and type in do not call list, because I did a whole video series on the do not call list. And so this question is from the do not call list. David is a new real estate sales licensee. David may contact an expired listing client to solicit new business referrals. Well, can he do that indefinitely? Can he do it 18 months after the sales transaction? Within the first 18 months after the expiration, or never? Well, the answer is he can do that within the first 18 months after the expiration. Now, the reason you see this 18 months after the sales transaction, but let's read the question. This is why you have to read the questions 2 or 3 times. It says very clearly, David may contact an expired listing client. Well, we're talking about here after the expiration, okay? Wasn't a sales transaction, it was an expiration. So correct answer is C in this example. So don't forget that. You will see a couple of questions on the do not call list. 1, 2, I don't think you'll see 3, but you could see 2 very easily from the do not call list. So go to my YouTube channel. Be sure and search for the do not call list. I've got a video there. We cover a bunch of questions and a lot of topics there on do not call. What does a property executed properly, what does a properly executed promissory note establish? Now remember, the note shows evidence of the debt. The mortgage or the deed of trust is used as security. Okay? So let's read this question. What does a properly executed promissory note shows evidence of the debt establish? Terms of repayment and the interest rate? Yes. The amount of the debt? Yes. The names of the borrower and the lender? Yes. All of the above? Yes. Okay. It shows evidence of the debt. Now, if you want to show evidence of the debt, you're going to have to show the name of the lender and the name of the borrower, and you're going to have to show the interest rate, the terms of repayment, and all of that other stuff. So the correct answer for this one is all of the above. All right, Mike is the assessor for Washington County. The values of properties in the county established by Mike for the purpose of determining taxes are called all of the following except. Now, I don't know how many of these questions you will see where it's all of the above or all of the following except, but let's read this question again because there's a lot. These kind of questions, even though they're short, sometimes they can trip me up if I don't read them a second or a third time. Mike is the assessor for Washington County. So Mike's the assessor. The values of properties in the county established by Mike for the purpose of determining taxes are called all of the following except. So all of these would be true except, well, is it taxable value? Assessed value? We know assessed value's got to be true because we've talked about that in class. Ad valorem value? Well, I think that's true because we talk about ad valorem tax. Market value. Well, market value is really not the same as tax value, and we don't talk about taxable value a lot in the class, but if all of these are true except for one, it'd have to be market value because market value is going to be different than taxable value, okay? So, again, you can really see how they can take these questions and take the topics and the material you learn and just put it in a meat grinder and grind it up and come out with something totally new. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not the way we've studied that in class. But it only makes sense that taxable, assessed, ad valorem, it's all the same. Market value, that's a different value than taxable value. So I like that question. That's a good question. Well, if John, a real estate broker, is said to be a single agency relationship, who would John represent? Would he represent the buyer only, the seller only, both the buyer and seller, only a buyer, or the seller, but not both? Now, again, this is one of those questions, and you're going to see these. This is the crash course, and by the way, I'm going to have to kind of cut this off after this question because it is 6:15 now in the evening, and I told my wife I would be up at 6:15 to eat, so she's having dinner ready, so I have to adhere to my instructions that I gave her. But we covered several questions, and we'll be doing more of these. But this is a crash course to help you pass the exam. And let me tell you what, you are going to see questions like this. And when you read these and look at them, there is only one answer that makes sense. I mean, you could rationalize and say, well, A makes sense and B makes sense. However, they are not the best answers. The best answer would have to be what? Would have to be D, only a buyer or the seller, because if you're in a single agency, you could represent the buyer or the seller. The buyer is a buyer's agent or the seller is a seller's agent, but you could not represent both. Okay? So, wow, we covered a number of questions there. I've got another video on my website where we do a crash course for the exam, and I think I covered 20 or something questions there. So watch those. Search for the do not call list. I've done some on the lead-based paint. You'll see questions on those. I've done some on radon. I've done a bunch of those types of questions. So they're out there on our YouTube channel, but you've got to subscribe. I got to have you to subscribe. That's one of the best things you need to do. Now, good news. This year I'm president for Missouri Realtors, and I'm not saying that to brag, but just to remind you, I have a lot going on my plate. However, things are kind of lightening up a little bit. And one of my goals is, because our channel is just growing by leaps and bounds, I think YouTube's putting the gas pedal on. Thank you, YouTube. I appreciate that so much. And subscribers are coming in. And I'm just having the best time doing this, that I want to start doing more live streaming, going through the material, doing things like this with the exam questions. So you need to subscribe to our YouTube channel, click on that bell, and be on the lookout, because I'm going to be helping you have content and information that you can go over those few days right before the exam. And by golly, we're going to help you pass that test regardless of what school you went to, because I want to help you pass the test, okay? And I'm also going to be doing a lot of live streaming on how to grow your real estate business after you get your exam. So we're going to have fun, but you won't be able to participate if you do not subscribe to the channel. So you want to do what? You want to go over and you want to hit the subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, go to YouTube and search for what? Search for Global Real Estate School. Check us out at Global Real Estate School. We've got lots of great resources. My Real Estate Exam Coach works in all 50 states. I have digital flashcards. We have our courses approved in many states, and we're here to help you pass the real estate exam. And I wanted to just say thank you so much. Have a great day or evening. It's evening now, and I will talk to you very soon. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for listening to the podcast for Global Real Estate School. I'm John Mayfield, the Real Estate Tech Guy. Go out and make it a great day.